Are you ready to stop the self-sabotage and create the life you desire? Well, in order for that to happen, you need to break free from the bad beliefs that are holding your success hostage. You need to optimize the stress by turning it into extra energy for success. And those hurtful habits? Well, we need to give that pain a purpose for progress. Welcome to Stop the Self-Sabotage and Create the Life You Desire podcast. Welcome to the month where we celebrate the magnificence of the divine feminine. It's one of the reasons why Mother's Day is in May, right? But it can be such a challenge to be able to move forward in life when you feel like, as the female, you're having to carry everybody else, whether it might be their emotional processing or their bad beliefs or taking actions on their behalf because they don't know how to do it. And then when we seek help, these are some of the things that we might hear. Well, what red flags did you see in what it is that you were doing? Oh, okay. What if we were actually programmed and conditioned not to see those red flags? Or even worse, when we saw red flag, we were conditioned and programmed to make it mean green and that we had to go into trying even harder. Or seeking peace. Oh, yes. You know that you're on the right path when there's peace. Well, your system can learn to seek peace through appeasing or fawning over others at the expense of yourself. And what if the only way you feel free is to fall in love with somebody's potential at the denial of what's actually happening in reality and the responsibility that they're willing to take? This is what me and my esteemed colleagues are talking about today, is how to go from wounded to wealth through the divine feminine that you already possess. She just hasn't been given a space and a place to be nurtured and nourished to where she can step in and begin to guide your life. So I'd like to introduce you to the other women that are joining me today. So Angie, say hi to everybody and let them know who you are.
Hello, everybody. I'm Angie Monco. Should I just share my little?
Yeah, go for it.
So I work with intuitive women leaders to find their confidence and their courage so they can make space within themselves to receive more love, joy, and peace. And at the end of the day, when they look back at their lives, they can say, I lived, I loved, I laughed, I served, I have no regrets.
Oh, I like that. Okay, Jenn, let's hear from you.
That's a hard lead to follow. Okay, I am Jenn Brower. I'm calling in from Canada. I work with small groups of women with the focus of awareness and healing through retreats and intensives.
And let's take that just a little bit further, Jenn. What is your focus for women? The F's.
Did I not say healing and awareness?
Oh,
Yeah.
I like the other way. What is it that's your focus for right now?
Oh, healing and awareness.
Yeah. Fuckery free?
Sorry. Yeah, that. Of course. Yes. Fuckery free 50s. Yes. The big goal. I can't believe I forgot that part. Yes. That is my mantra and my goal for many years.
Yes. Fuckery free 50s. I love that.
Wow. That's great.
Isn't it though? Okay. So our talking points today. Red flags. We've all heard it. We've either had it said to us, or maybe we've said it to somebody else. What red flags did you miss that were supposed to be warnings? Tell me what you think about that, and what tips, tools, or techniques do you have for our women listeners to actually become wise? So, Angie, I'm going to start with you.
Okay. So just so that I'm clear, these red flags are fake red flags, right?
Well, okay.
Or are they? Like,
yeah, let's talk about some red flags. What if you go into a relationship? It could be with, like me, I'm in the dating world, or it could be with a friendship, and you've got red flags of emotional immaturity on the behalf of the other person. And so now you're into the relationship and you're finding that they're deflecting. They're not taking responsibility, that they're creating some chaos without recognizing that they're even creating it.
Sure.
So,
yeah. Okay.
What do you have to say about that?
Well, okay. So I'm going to use the example of a potential client. Okay.
Yeah.
And the red flag that I think is a legitimate red flag is that I call it slippery. They're slippery. That, the person reached out to me back in November and wanted to schedule a session, and I've worked with them before. And so I followed up. They said follow up after the holidays. So I did. But then it's just been this slippery slope of non-commitment of wanting to do it. So we finally set one up. And then this person, I'm not going to say gender even, got sick. And so what the red flag here, and I know it in my energy system, is that this person is not ready for what they think they want. Okay. So they're not ready. And, I instead of, my normal tendency would be to call them out like, oh, the saboteur's in the way right now or whatever. But the change for me just recently is, instead of calling them out, which maybe sometimes that's appropriate, just to speak into the field, like, this is what I'm sensing. Because I did do that. That's why we set the appointment that later got canceled, and they said they'd reschedule after Memorial Day. Is the new thought that I have is, what if I just give this person the benefit of the doubt that they know their timing better than I do, and that I just relax about it? So, and there's more fish in the sea, right? So I don't need to worry about that if they're not ready. I don't know. That's, to me, the red flag is about the client, right? That they're not ready. Yeah. And we know that they're not ready.
And so when they're not ready, what I think I hear you saying is allow them to not be ready.
Exactly. Give them the benefit of the doubt. That's what a loving self-advocate does, is she gives others the benefit of the doubt. Like, hey, I don't know the timing. Let them figure the timing out. I'm not going to chase, but as long as I don't have the mentality of chasing and I truly have the mentality of serving, it's not a problem.
Yeah. So you're not taking responsibility for their timeline.
Right.
Okay.
I could have said it like that a lot sooner.
No, that's the difference between us. Okay. Is that, yes, you do great at explaining, and both you and Jen are great at stories. And I'm like, oh, here it is.
Like, get to the point.
So Jen, what's your take on red flags? And, so Angie said she's allowing. What are you doing around red flags? What do you want our audience to know?
A really good mentor of mine told me that boundaries bless and rules restrict. And so I think it's just one of those things about recognizing that as soon as you're feeling a little trigger, like whether you say red flag, I say trigger, or, that feeling, that knowing that something is amiss. I think it's just about taking a look at what you need within yourself to be safe. And what does that look like? And it's easier said than done, because I get triggered all the time. And sometimes I'm often wondering why it's even affecting me in that way. And that's usually when I can look at realizing that someone is actually projecting their fear or their, angst onto me. And it might not be in an area where I'm actually anxious, but maybe the part that makes me anxious is laying down the boundary. So I think that that's important. And so in terms of like a client who's calling and kind of giving the runaround, I think it's one of those things. It's like, you can bless them and say, I won't be rescheduling for however many times or whatever, because you've missed the first two. And that's not the way I choose to be treated, kind of thing. So always easier said than done, but that's kind of what I get from that situation.
And you touched on something really important, Jen. Laying down boundaries causes anxiety.
Yeah.
Yes. For
That's
people pleasers? Oh, yes.
Oh my gosh. So actually getting used in an unhealthy way, being utilized for someone else's benefit at our expense, can feel normal.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, oh my gosh.
That's the funny part about this work, is that what used to be normal is so triggering, but not always in a way that you can kind of see the forest through the trees. Because what I used to kind of trip all over myself to please or fawn or whatever I was doing to kind of get out of the crisis mode, is like when I have the ability to now step back and kind of look at, all of the aspects of what's really going on. Like, truth be told, that if I am triggered now after all of this work, there's something bigger at play. And because I don't sweat the small stuff in the same way. And so, we all have instances that kind of cross our paths. And I think it's one of those things that you said something just brilliant this morning that was so helpful to me. So I'm going to share it as a Dawnism, as of the millions that you've shared with me over the years. But it's, it's kind of one of those things about, like, you don't know success until you failed. And so when you fail again, which we will all fail again and again and again, that's the whole piece about doing it faster and quicker, and then getting yourself out of it. And I think that in summary was kind of where Fuckery Free was born, because it was like, you can't continue to do, I think it was Einstein that said, you can't continue to do the same thing again and again without expect a different result. And so that is so true. And I kept kind of bumping up to the same wall, like wondering, like, what's wrong with me that I'm constantly getting triggered, because the trigger wasn't necessarily the same. But what I didn't realize at the time, which, you schooled me and it was amazing learning, was that your body holds on to the emotion. So it doesn't even matter if the subject is the same, it still feels the same way. And so when you get that feeling, you're thinking, like, how could this person be triggering an abandonment wound from my childhood? Like, but it's not even about that. It's just that it still feels the same level of hurt. And especially, I think a lot of us that get into this work are empathic. Do you know what I mean? And we're doers, we're pleasers by nature. And so when you can feel other people's pain, you're also being triggered. So sometimes I've caught myself where I'm triggered. It's not even my trigger. They're triggering my trigger because I can feel the pain that they're in. And so that has taken, as you know, Dawn, a long time to, what I say, come to Jesus, where it's finally starting to sink in. Like, wait a minute, just because I feel it, it doesn't mean it belongs to me. And kind of put that in a separate bucket altogether. So that information was just so, along with the other millions of nuggets of information that you've shared, that one there was just so profoundly life-changing to kind of know and understand that, and be able to step back and kind of decompartmentalize in a way that makes, it makes perfect sense, even though it's not always clear. It's almost like the picture of it is still a little bit blurry, but when you can step back and you can tweak it and you can say, wait a minute, this doesn't necessarily mean it's a Jen problem. It could mean it's a them problem, but, like, just looking at it and reflecting differently, and then just making sure that we're safe ourselves and what we need to do to be safe, even though it's challenging.
And then,
oh gosh, Dawn, hold on. We're
Yeah.
never going to get off this call in an hour with the three of us. Oh my gosh.
Well,
Sorry,
this
I'll be
is
far less long-winded.
no.
No, I love it. I love it.
Yeah, this is the reason why the women who are listening to us need to reach out. They need to take action because guess what? We have so much intelligence here: physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual intelligence. Because we have 4 levels: we have crisis, stabilization, regulation, and then intelligence. Well, we have been taught to sustain crazy amounts of pain in those 4 areas because of what we've been through. And then we have someone come along and go, well, what were the red flags? We were taught never to even see red flags. We were taught that when somebody was in pain, step up and make it happen for them. We were taught to feel it for them. And this is not something that we can heal on our own. If it was, we'd already have it.
Right.
Everybody on this call has worked with and are working with their own mentors because we know we can't take our lives any further. There's an old saying in 12-step groups, it's hard to see the picture when you're inside the frame. So it's hard to see that intelligence that's trying to work through us for growth when we're making it go for somebody else. So you're right, Angie. This is amazing on what we're sharing. And so the audience, if we don't get to everything, it's up to them to reach out to one of us and go, I need further assistance. And I'm going to tell our listeners, you are not going to get that in a book. You're not going to get it in a workshop. You're not going to get it in a class. You are only going to get it in a personal relationship where you can become vulnerable and discover what's really going on inside. There needs to be an intimate setting to where even when it's Jenn and she's working on one of her retreats, you're coming into a sacred space and place where you can drop that BS that you've been given at the door. You can pick it back up whenever you go out, but then come in. And the reason why we don't like doing that, the reason why, I'd rather can you just give me some online learning? Because when we become vulnerable, we become woundable. Well, that because you were woundable, you built walls. And we have to start deconstructing those. And in its place, put up beautiful garden gates and fences, and then have rules on who we allow in. Okay, guys. So what I want to share with as far as, well, what did you see with the red flags? The person was emotionally unavailable. It could be a potential client. They're not ready to commit. It could be somebody that we're in a relationship with and they just don't want to take responsibility. We were taught not to see any flags at all. It's known as a subconscious scotoma. Subconscious scotoma is simply a blind spot that is held in your subconscious, and your subconscious runs your quality of life patterns. It runs all of your progress. It holds all of your patterns, habits, experiences, memories. And so you were taught through repeated exposure to something, because your system, when it first encountered it, went, no, I don't think this is right. And the person in authority took away your power and said, oh yeah, that's right. Oh yeah, there's nothing wrong with it. And even though you knew that there might have been something wrong with it, to be able to survive, you had to learn to tolerate sustained pain, sustained crisis, sustained chaos. So now that's familiar to you. And when it shows up, even after doing a lot of work, your system will always seek out what's familiar. And it'll go, oh, this is like what I experienced all those decades ago. And that immature, underdeveloped aspect of your personality steps forward and goes, oh, I can take this on. And then you wind up in a situation, even ever so brief, where you're like, well, wait, no, that's your responsibility, that not mine. Wait, so we have to have a pause. And so there's an, oh, wait, that says, I'm picking up your pain. And then we need to decide, how can we move forward in a way that is safe for us, that allows our healing, but also allows our emotional intelligence. A lot of times people are healed and they don't realize it because they're regulated, but they haven't allowed the intelligence to begin to bloom and blossom, where they recognize, oh, I can wind up bringing this person into my life because they're familiar to who I had once before. So when someone says to you, what red flags did you miss? Think of Dawn giving them the middle finger, which on the five motivators, the middle finger stands for freedom and autonomy. And when someone tries to take it away, that's what you want to do. You want to flip them off. So just imagine giving them the sign of freedom. You don't have to do it in reality. Give them the sign of freedom and realize you were taught not to see red flags. It's not your fault, but you do have to take 100% responsibility on how to move from crisis to stabilization to regulation to intelligence. Okay. So the next one, we have the 4 experiences whenever our system is overwhelmed, not challenged. So when we're challenged, it's meant to develop something within us for outer mastery. This is emotional flooding, though. We feel like whatever it is, the situation or the person has power over us. So fight, flight, freeze. And then the 4th one is either appease or fawn. So appease is whenever we're going to people please to keep the peace. Fawn is when we're like, oh, I just need to build them up. They haven't had anybody see their potential. And so I just need to pour into them. So what if you were taught to only seek peace through fawning or appeasing at your own expense? What do you do when you realize that you're experiencing that, or what do you have your clients do? Jen, we're going to start with you this time. What do you do?
Oh, my goodness. Well, that one resonates with me because I felt like I'll just start by saying that it took me losing almost all of my hair and going into full adrenal failure before I actually decided that enough was enough. So that was the big thing, because I was always getting emotionally flooded and I was overwhelmed all the time. And so I didn't really understand what any of that meant. So it looks very differently to me now, all these years later. But basically, I think the biggest thing is to be able to step back. I think one of the tools that you had taught me is like, pretend that you're further away, like that you're out of the frame, and then, look at the situation objectively. Do you know what I mean? And so that you're pulling yourself out of being immersed in someone else's mask kind of thing. And that's a really hard thing to do with pleasers and fawners and all of these types of things, because we do that so well. One of the things I didn't say in the beginning is I started my life off as a nurse. And in hindsight, that wasn't the best career to start for me, because it was terrible to feel all those feelings and not know what to do with them and be so young. And so the belief or the story that I took away from that at the time was that I was failing, like I couldn't cut it, like I wasn't making it as a nurse, and what was wrong with me. And so now, all these years later, when I'm trying to figure out what fuckery-free 50 really looks like, I realized that that wasn't the right story at all. It was just that I had no idea how to deal with all of this flooding. And what I was taught to do was the opposite of what I should have been doing. And I just had no boundaries. So the very first thing would be to step back and to kind of decompress yourself. And one of the methods that works best for me, and it doesn't work for everybody, is just writing all of your thoughts down. And so you could do that like brain mapping, just writing words, or you could write something. I just find that when it's out of your head, it's easier to get out of your heart. And so that's the thing that passes through me the quickest, is if I write things down. And then I usually try and look at the situation from a bird's eye view in terms of like, what's objective? Is this really me? Is this them? Where is this coming from? Why am I feeling what I'm feeling? Which part is being triggered? And, you know, I'll be honest, there's some places where I'm still stuck, and I still have to look to you, Dawn, to help me kind of see the various, you know, points that are kind of coming at me. Because, you know, one of the things about wholeness and working towards, you know, solving some of these things is that usually your greatest gifts can be your greatest curse. And so we were talking about it even today, about seeing the potential in people. When you see the potential in people, it's hard to realize that maybe they're not acting in your best interest, especially when they're already close to you. And so, you know, when you are objective and step back, you can see it maybe a little bit differently if you take yourself out of the equation and think of how you might tell a friend that you would react. And then I think that just the tension or the stress or the overwhelm or the you know, the degree of chaos that is in that moment, I think it just kind of really depletes. And so like you can go from a 10 to a 2 much quicker, like taking yourself out of the equation and not necessarily trying to solve all of those problems, and recognizing where it came from. Like that's the biggest thing, is just that level of awareness of really why you feel the way you do.
Okay. So Angie, how are you going to build on that?
Well, I always start with a story. And for me, I grew up a people pleaser, a peacekeeper, and got with a man when I was 15 years old, who I ended up marrying and had a daughter. And when I wanted out of that marriage, I ended up giving him custody of her when she was 2 years old. And talk about people pleasing, right? I mean, I didn't want to give her I didn't want to give custody. I felt threatened. I felt like I was the one that wanted out of the marriage. And so, I mean, if there's any greater self-betrayal than that, I don't know what it would be. But so yeah, I totally understand this. And what I'm working on now, and it's related to the topic of from wound or wealth, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is that wounded inner child. So, you know, we have the wounded child and we have the adaptive child. The adaptive child's more kind of bratty teenager type, but then the wounded child, and this is the part that I feel like I really am in touch with right now, is this little girl who was so blindsided, you know,
Mm-hmm.
2 times. When I lost my Auntie Lane when I was 6 years old, and very suddenly to death. You know, she died within 2 weeks after I wished she died. So there's a lot of like guilt there, guilt and shame. And then losing my daughter, Maddie, a few years ago, you know, they were very similar. Like my little wounded child was so, do you want to say something?
Yeah. Can you explain what you mean by losing your daughter?
Yeah. 4.5 years ago, I lost my only biological child, Maddie. She was 22 years old, to cystic fibrosis. And
this is the one that you allowed your ex to take full custody of.
Correct. Yeah. She did come live with me when she was 13 years old, and that was a fight, but we got her back. And so for the next 9 years, she lived with me. And it was great and it was not great, you know, and all these things. And, but I like right now I'm looking at these stuffed elephants. I have this I don't know, great comfort that I get from my stuffed animals. And one of them, they're elephants, because Maddie and we had an elephant tattoo made together shortly before she died. So there's a great, comfort from elephants. But I've got like 6 of them right there. And so this wounded child wants that. Like, I sleep with them at night, and I mean, that it's, and so I'm working on healing that wounded child that Jen, you said a little bit earlier, which was spot on, is I need to create a safe space within myself, And so to end the people pleasing, to me, this is how I'm going to finally arrest it, whether it's wanting validation from clients or from, my lover, my parents, whomever, it doesn't matter, is to finally create this safe space within myself to calm my nervous system and to let my little inner child know, because it's that inner child that is often hurt, right? It doesn't make sense logically, but it's not a bratty adaptive child. It's a wounded child who's like, don't leave me. Like,
right.
And so now where I'm at is, do I allow myself to go after wealth and the true potential that I could truly live my life? Because a part of me says, what the fuck? You're just going to lose that too. Why would you go after something? Why would you fully live your life? Because you are going to lose everything eventually. So there's that self-protective piece that doesn't want me to take those risks. And Dawn, I'm to the point where it's like, okay, so what? I am willing to step out there and be hurt and be really hurt, and not self-protect the ego,
yes,
but actually from a place of, I want to see what it's going to feel like to evolve into this next part of me, that self-growth thing that I love, and also to experience prosperity versus lack. I'm sort of tired of the lack story, I'm kind of getting bored with it.
Yeah. Time for a new one. And so Jen and Angie, what you're both sharing as far as the aspect of the identity that's getting triggered and how we need to flip the switch and move into that part of us that can regulate and holds the intelligence, but we have to step back and give ourselves space. The one thing that I'd like to add on to all of that is that when you start doing that, you're going to go through withdrawals. And nobody talks about it, which is, hello, wise women that are listening to us. You want to work with one of these women. They're certified hypnotists. They know how to assist with withdrawals because the appeasing and the fawning sets up certain chemical releases in your system that feel good, which is the reason why you continue to do it. And so when you stop doing it, you're going to feel like something's wrong. Well, I thought when I was going to get healthy, it's supposed to feel better. Well, guess what? Not in the beginning. I was sharing with someone just this morning that I had somebody come back into my life that was a very familiar energy with the chaos, crisis, and drama that they brought with them. And they were only in my life for a few days. And then I was like, oh, have to usher you back out. And then I'm sitting there last night, and it's been several nights in a row. I am single. I live by myself. I don't have my puppy yet. I am getting a new puppy, but I don't have him yet. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I am so sad. I mean, situationally depressed. A dog ain't going to help this. What's wrong with me? And then it clicked. The intelligence came on and said, oh no, you're going through withdrawals, because the system was so familiar with the roller coaster of emotions that other person brought to them. And you went right back into it. And now you're equalizing yourself. And it's going, we're supposed to be solving problems. Oh my gosh, there's supposed to be chaos. Oh, and I don't have that. And my system is beginning to regulate But the withdrawals to the ups and downs, I'm still going through them. I'm like, oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. What is it that I need to do? Hey, some self-hypnosis, begin to numb myself out to the withdrawals. The lesson that is there that will serve me will still take place. I just don't need to feel, as both Angie and Jenn have been saying, where the body always keeps count. It always knows. My body does not have to keep the score on this one and show me how I'm losing. So I just want you to be aware that as you go from appeasing and fawning into a safe place for your growth, you're going to have withdrawals on it.
Mm-hmm.
Just expect it.
It's an addiction, to that. And to pain, to suffering, to struggle, it's a way of thinking and being.
Martyring.
What is it?
Martyr, being a martyr.
Yeah, I'm good at that one. You said a statement I just want to ask for you to repeat earlier. You said you'll remember from crisis to stabilization. Is it to regulation?
And then intelligence.
Okay, I wanted to make sure I had that right. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So crisis is what will typically bring people to us.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so listeners, you can't move into growth. I know you want it so bad, but when you're in crisis, all we can do is address that drama, address the confusion. Order is the first law of heaven. In every major spiritual tradition, the higher power that created all the energies starts separating them day from night, land and water. So order, we have to begin to create order, because when you're in crisis, there is no order. It is out of order thinking. And this is how you were manipulated and parentified earlier, as things were given to you out of order so you could be controlled. Then after that, then we can begin to stabilize and look at what's the identity infection. So
you call it identity infection before?
No, because that's what happened, is we were infected. Mm-hmm. And then after that, we begin to regulate. The only way you can regulate is by looking at reality, which is going to take me to our next point in just a moment. Mm-hmm. We've been taught to live in somebody else's fantasy world, their world of their potential. And we have to allow them not to ever achieve it. But to do that, we have to know what's real. And then after that, the intelligence. Now we've got the space for the intelligence to begin to develop and upgrade who we are. So did that give you an answer in a long-winded kind of way, Angie?
Yeah, I like long-winded.
Okay. So the only way to feel free is to fall in love with potential at the denial of reality, is the final point that we're going to touch on today. So it is, we were actually programmed and conditioned to see somebody's potential and act on making that happen, again, at the expense of ourselves, instead of allowing who they really are to inform us. So when you feel like you're stuck and always trying to bring the best out in others, what's the best piece of advice do you have for that, Angie?
So it's there's a little bit of swirl going on in my mind with this, because it could be good and it could be bad in some ways. So when I think of see someone's potential, and instead of allowing who they really are to inform us, what I immediately go to is, okay, I'm looking at potential partners, to get with, and why I pick them. I see their potential and I want to rescue them in a sense, right? That's what I think of when you talk about that.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I did do that with my first husband. I thought, well, I saw his potential and all of this, but I also saw other red flags. I certainly did. But then, okay, so then the opposite side of that is bring out the best in others, which I think that's a good thing, to try to bring out the best in others, believe in them beyond their story. You might have heard the saying, trust them and they become trustworthy. Have you heard that?
No, I have not, but okay.
Trust them and they become trustworthy. Like if we see beyond their story and really, but then we have to align with that and start treating them truly, not from a fake, people pleasing, manipulative standpoint, but truly see beyond their story of suffering that they're telling us. And then they'll start to step into that possible. It's not a given, but it's a possibility. And it's certainly more likely if we see beyond their victim nature, So there's two things going on here.
And I agree with that to a point. It's said that Jesus, on the people he healed, he saw them healed.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Okay. So, but when he went to the lame man at the pool of Bethesda, he said, do you want to be healed? He didn't assume it.
Right.
He invited, and the guy gave him all the excuses of why he couldn't. And then Jesus said, okay, pick up your mat and go. So Jesus created the space and the place, but what the guy did with it was up to him.
Right.
So yes, I agree with, I don't see people as broken. I don't see them as flawed, and I don't see them as needing to be fixed. I see the fact that they learn some unhealthy ways to survive that can't take them any further into being able to thrive.
Right.
And so we can create a space together, but if they never do anything with the space, it's going to be up to them.
Exactly. Just like that client I mentioned earlier, like I can give her the opportunity, but she's got to be willing to go and do her part, to take responsibility for it. So I totally agree with that. It's just, there's a lot of complexity,
There is very much so.
Conversation.
And I'm not going to fall in love with somebody's potential. I'll fall in love with who they are.
That's right.
And I'll accept their potential.
Yes. It's like I was listening to someone the other day say, one thing in relationship, accept the man that you or woman, whoever it is, exactly as they are. And if you can do that, and you're in love with exactly who they are and don't expect them to change it or anything like that, that was the advice. And I do agree with that as well. Just love them where they're at.
Yes. So Jenn, what do you have to add on to all of this?
Oh my goodness. Well, another Dawnism. I think that in reference to this point, and just add on to yours, you had said to me before that a good steward says that when someone doesn't receive from me, that's between them and God, and it's not for me to fix. It's not my assignment. And I think that is part of the challenge that comes with, a degree of fairly hefty wounds. And so, it's kind of one of those tongue-in-cheek things where I used to joke that I was Humpty Dumpty because I had to put all the pieces back together again because I felt like a little cracked egg. And so there were so many it doesn't have to be like big, deep things. And that was another part of like my whole story, was that like my problems weren't big enough to account for trauma. And so I think that in general, like from an audience perspective, like I'm just trying to kind of share the things that I feel like a newbie would listen to and resonate with. It's like, if something's triggering you, it's a wound and you just have to figure out where it comes from. Doesn't matter how big or how small. We don't have to figure out the story of what that looks like until you have someone to help you with that. And then the other thing that just came to me, I feel like it was like a spirit thing where it just said to me, where coming back to the wound or the wealth, is I wrote down currency. And I really feel like that added to a lot of my challenges, from a young age, was that the people pleasing and the giving, or, all of the things in terms of what's emotionally flooding, was a form of currency. And so, it adds to the lack when you're constantly giving out your currency, your heart, your love, your emotions, for someone else, and yet your bucket has holes in it and you can never seem to fill it. And so I think that is just a huge piece for people who feel like they are in lack. And it's like, well, as you would say, Dawn, duh. Of course you are. Because, and that always runs through my head. Every time I have a thought, I just hear you going, duh, of course you do, because. And so it just reminds me of this currency where it's like, it's not monetary, but there's a price to be paid. And I mean, ultimately, if we don't get our shit together, we're the only people that are responsible for us, and we're the only people that can do the work. And so if you want to live, in avoidance or, acceptance of, what is, but you're not putting down those boundaries, then your currency is always being depleted. And so you have a more difficult time feeling prosperous or feeling wealthy. And I just want to be super clear that doesn't always necessarily mean wealth in a monetary form. I feel like the biggest price I've paid has been with my health and with the various things that I've given to people, sometimes for free and when they haven't asked. And they've told me multiple times in different ways that they weren't interested. And yet I was getting the drug as being the quote unquote cheerleader. And so I think that when you can reflect on those things, one of the biggest things that was a takeaway from you was that, sometimes when you are a person who sees people's potential and or a cheerleader and or, a spokesperson and just have this love in your heart that you want to share and have other people do well, it's because of course you didn't have that. Do you know what I mean? And so it's
yes.
like when you see that in someone else and you kind of, I have 3 kids and I find that I parent based on what was missing. Well, there was a lot missing. And so, I've enabled my spoiled children. And so now I'm kind of trying to back some of that up in terms of setting down some boundaries because, mom did anything and everything and was trying to keep all the plates spinning up in the air. And so that currency made me feel less wealthy and always had a little bit of a lack mentality. And so I just think that that's like a huge nugget that was something that I didn't understand really early on, that, that the wealth and wound, they mean different things, prosperity and lack, and there's this piece of the wholeness of that is that you don't know prosperity until you felt lack. And that's kind of like the gift is the gold. Do you know what I mean? And so, that yin and yang of understanding what the other side is so that you can reflect in a more positive way and make better choices so that your currency isn't down and your bucket isn't leaking, are all the ways to emotionally support yourself. And then as you get to fill up your bucket, your spirit is more fulfilled and therefore you feel much more prosperous, even if it isn't financial per se.
No, because you're correct on that. It is financial. It is with relationships. It is with your physical health. It is with time.
Yeah.
It is with anything that nurtures and nourishes you. Opportunities, creativity. That wealth shows up in a lot of areas. Yes.
Jen,
okay.
I just have a quick question. Are you a new hypnotist?
New hypnotist, yes, but not new to Dawn.
Are you new? I mean, are you a coach or because you seem like you have a lot of experience.
Oh, no, I'm just looking at notes. Don't let.
No, you have wisdom. You have wisdom.
She has a lot of wisdom. There's
some days more than others, but thank you. Thank you. Yes, let's just say I've had a lot of lessons and I have learned a lot from those lessons. And so therefore the pendulum is starting to swing the other direction. And I want to use the fuckery for good because I've said to Dawn before, one of the big things for me is that I didn't have anyone in my life that was a support system or a leader or a mentor that I could go to for, I'm going to say proper parenting, and I don't mean that disrespectfully. And I didn't know what that looked like. And I had to kind of go through this whole, coaching, mentoring program. And, it's a lifeline for me. I can't imagine my life without it. Now it's just a piece of the work that I need to do that's continuous. And I think that that's part of it, is like true growers and people who have been hurt with things like this, like your work is never really done. It's just a matter of like always continually trying to kind of make that better. And so now in terms of what I do, I don't really call it coaching per se. I'm not really on the individual level because I do like more retreats. It's more in public speaking and in the midst of writing a book, and I'm, trying to kind of help people figure out a way that I can use hypnosis through like a little bit of fast tracking. I would say that comes from one of my big wounds or big problems with being impatient. And so it's not that I think you can blow through it by any means. I know that like for me, I had hit absolute rock bottom, and, the pandemic was both the time where it took my life and saved my life all in the same breath. And so I then had the bandwidth and the time to, to do this over time and do it continually and consistently. And so I just feel for people who don't necessarily have that and have like quote unquote regular jobs that are 9 to 5 and who work for someone else, like because I'm self-employed, I have the flexibility. And so with that thought process in mind, I wanted to develop something that could be potentially easier for someone else to come in for 3 or 4 days in a workshop, understand like a big piece of this, not that, and just see what they could take away in, I'm going to say short spurts, you know what I mean? And so that's the angle that I come at it.
Nice.
Okay. So before we conclude with your contact information, both Angie and Jenn, this is the one thing that I want to add as far as the only way to feel free is to fall in love with potential, the denial of reality. And again, that goes back to your programming and conditioning. Somebody took your heart and they filled it with their sewage and trash. And then they gave it back to you. And they expected you to overcompensate to clean it up for them as well as yourself. And now you will continue to overcompensate in areas of the heart and always giving because you think that's what you need to do in order for them to be okay. But it means that you're constantly mucking around in the sewer system and it's making you sick. It's making you sick financially, in your relationships, in your health, spiritually. And so we want to get you out and we want to get you in a safe space and place where your sacred self can begin to show up, because the divine feminine must always receive before she can achieve. And your achievement up to this point has been based on receiving from others the leftovers that they decided you could have, instead of you actually living your legacy based on what you already possess. But it hasn't been given the proper place and nourishment to be able to grow and then to nurture and nourish you. Okay, so Angie, how can our audience reach out to you?
My website is Harmony Harbor, HARBOR.com, harmonyharbor.com. And my email is Angie, ANGIE, at the same harmonyharbor.com. And my phone number is 1-314-422-4639. 314-422-6520. 314-422-6520. And I do have a free masterclass coming up May 10th. This will be available.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So it's out at my website under events, and it's 3 steps to expand your potential, clearing barriers to your success as a rising woman leader.
Excellent.
It's free.
Jen, how can they reach out
amazing.
to you?
I want to attend that. That sounds great.
Now you go to her site and sign up. Yes.
There you go. Okay, well, I'll just keep it really simple. So it's Jenn Brower. It's 1-905-872-5366, which actually spells Jenn, Jenn. So it's 905-872-5366. I prefer text and or calls. I just like to keep it simple. I don't like to check multiple methods of connection simply because I am trying to walk a fuckery-free path, and that is absolute fuckery for me because I can't stand to look at all these different channels and all these different things. So I'm just trying to simplify my life in some way. So if you need simple,
there we go.
That's
yes.
the number.
Okay. And for those that are listening that would either like to work with me personally, or maybe you're already a healingpreneur, a certified hypnotist, a coach, or in another healing modality, such as a therapist or counselor, and you want to know how to take a woman from wounded to wealth through the divine feminine, that is what I'm offering for May. Either work with me personally, or I will train you. I will certify you in that process. So what do you need to do? You need to reach out to me, 1-636-699-7791. Leave me a voicemail and say you want wounded to wealth through the divine feminine for yourself personally, or you want to talk to me about a professional certification in it. You can also text me. So those are the 2 ways, because I am not putting this on my website. This is only being offered for the month of May, because I want to tap into your brilliance and your magnificence that you hold in this month. And that energy, because of Mother's Day, we've got it going all month long. Let's make it happen. All right. Thank you, goddesses, for joining me today. Again, you guys don't hang up. I'm just concluding the call for our audience. So thank you so much, beautiful goddesses, for joining us. And please reach out to one of the other goddesses that were here, Jenn, Angie, myself, and let's make the world a better place, because you're better in it for yourself.
Thank you, Dawn.